The check sat on the mahogany table between them. $50,000. Written in elegant cursive handwriting, signed by someone who clearly believed money could erase anything, including a human life growing inside Lily's body. This should be more than enough for the procedure and for you too. Relocate, Victoria Ashford said, her manicured fingers pushing the check closer across the polished wood. Somewhere far from Boston. Somewhere appropriate for someone of your background. Lily Chen was 23 years old, and she had never imagined that the word background could sound like such a weapon. She sat in the Ashford family's drawing room. They actually called it a drawing room, like something out of a Victorian novel, wearing the same jeans and sweater she'd worn to her shift at the diner that morning. Her hands rested on her still flat stomach, protecting something these people would never understand. The room smelled like old money and fresh contempt. Oil paintings of dead Ashfords stared down from the walls, their expressions frozen in the same cold superiority that now lived on Victoria's face. Thomas Ashford Sr. stood by the fireplace, not even bothering to look at Lily directly. His wife had been designated to handle this situation, as they kept calling it. As they kept calling Lily's baby. My son made a mistake. Victoria continued, her voice smooth as poison. A youthful indiscretion with someone from work, but Thomas has a future ahead of him. Harvard Law, a partnership in his father's firm, a marriage to someone suitable. This, she gestured vaguely at Lily's stomach, doesn't fit into that future. Lily had met Thomas Ashford Jr. 6 months earlier at the upscale restaurant where she worked as a server, putting herself through community college. He'd been charming, persistent, different from the entitled rich boys who usually ignored her except to snap their fingers for more water. Or so she'd thought. He'd asked about her classes, her dreams, her life. He'd made her feel seen. What a carefully constructed lie that had been. The first warning sign had come 3 months into their relationship, when Thomas suggested she not mention where she lived. It's just easier, he'd said with that boyish smile. My parents are old-fashioned about some things. She'd noticed how he never invited her to family events. How their dates always happened in parts of the city where his family wouldn't accidentally see them. How he'd tensed up that one time they'd run into his college friend at a coffee shop, introducing her as a friend from work, instead of his girlfriend. She'd ignored those signs because she'd been in love, because he'd told her he loved her too, whispered it against her skin in his apartment on nights when the rest of the world felt far away. Because she'd believed that love could bridge the gap between her studio apartment in Dorchester and his family's brownstone in Beacon Hill. How breathtakingly naive she'd been. I'm 3 months pregnant, Lily said quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. I came here today to tell Thomas in person like an adult. I didn't expect to be ambushed by his parents with a check and an abortion demand before he even came downstairs. Thomas is not coming downstairs, Victoria said flatly. He's at the Harvard Club with his fiancée, Rebecca Whitmore. Perhaps you've heard of the Whitmores, the banking family? They announced their engagement last week. It'll be in the Globe tomorrow. The words hit like a physical blow. Fiancé. Engagement. Last week. While Lily had been working double shifts and throwing up every morning and wondering how to tell the man she loved that they were going to be parents, he'd been proposing to someone else. Someone with the right last name, the right address, the right everything. He's been engaged this whole time? Lily's voice cracked slightly. Don't be dramatic. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Their families have had an understanding for years. You were never going to be part of Thomas's real life. Surely you understood that. Double quotes. Thomas Ashford Sr. finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of old Boston money and older prejudices. My son has obligations. Responsibilities to this family, to our name, to our legacy. You're a waitress from... He paused, his lip curling slightly. Wherever it is you're from. This fantasy you've constructed in your head about being part of this family? It's embarrassing. Lily stood up slowly, leaving the check untouched on the table. Around her, she could feel the weight of generations of Ashford judgment, could sense how thoroughly they'd already erased her from their son's story. In their version, she was an inconvenient mistake, easily solved with money. A poor girl who'd gotten above her station and needed to be reminded of her place. But something in Lily's expression made Victoria pause. There was no crying, no begging, no desperate clinging to a relationship that had been built on lies. Instead, there was a calm that came from suddenly, clearly seeing the truth. And that truth was lighting a fire behind Lily's dark eyes that neither Ashford parent recognized as dangerous. They should have. "I'm keeping my baby," Lily said, her voice quiet but absolute. "And I don't want your money." Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Then you're stupider than I thought. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise a child? You can barely afford to feed yourself. You think you can provide for a baby? Give it the life it deserves. I'll find a way," Lily said. "You'll find a way," Thomas Sr. repeated mockingly. "With what? Your community college education? Your diner wages? You're delusional. That child will grow up in poverty because of your pride. Is that what you want?" "What I want," Lily said, walking toward the door, "is for my child to grow up knowing that some things can't be bought. That human beings aren't trash to be paid off and discarded. That dignity matters more than a trust fund." She was at the door when Victoria's voice stopped her one last time. "You'll regret this. When you're struggling to pay rent and buy diapers and explaining to your child why they can't have the things other kids have, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that we offered you a way out and you were too proud to take it." Lily turned back, and for just a moment the Ashfords saw something that should have terrified them. A young woman who'd been underestimated her entire life, who'd survived things that would have broken people born into comfort, who'd just had every last illusion shattered, and was now seeing the world with brutal, perfect clarity. "Maybe," Lily said. "Or maybe I'll remember this as the day I decided that the best revenge isn't destroying people like you. It's becoming everything you said I could never be." She walked out of that house, leaving the check on the table and her last bit of naivety behind. The Ashfords congratulated themselves on handling an unfortunate situation with minimal fuss. They had no idea they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. They'd given Lily Chen a reason to succeed that went beyond simple ambition. They'd given her fury, and fury, when properly channeled, could move mountains. What happened next would take years. It would require sacrifice and determination that would have broken most people. But if you're enjoying this story of how underestimating someone can become your greatest mistake, make sure to subscribe, because what Lily built from that moment of humiliation would eventually destroy everything the Ashfords held sacred. The young woman who walked out of that Beacon Hill brownstone would spend the next 5 years transforming herself. And the family who dismissed her as a poor girl with delusions would learn too late that the most dangerous person in any room is the one you've just given a reason to prove you wrong. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday morning, taped to Lily's apartment door like a scarlet letter for the modern age. 30 days to vacate. The landlord had suddenly decided to renovate the building, which was interesting timing considering Lily had lived there for 2 years without a single repair being made to the broken heating or the leaking bathroom sink. She stood in the narrow hallway of her Dorchester walk-up, one hand on her growing belly, the other clutching the notice, and felt the first real wave of panic since walking out of the Ashford house 3 months earlier. The baby was due in 6 months. She was barely making rent as it was, even with the extra shifts she'd been picking up at the diner. What Lily didn't know yet was that the landlord's sudden renovation plans had come courtesy of a phone call from someone with an expensive lawyer and a very specific interest in making her life difficult. The Ashfords didn't make direct threats. They simply made things happen, quietly, efficiently, the way old money always did. The manager at Riverside Restaurant called her into his office that same week. Frank had always been decent to her, had given her the job when she'd first moved to Boston with nothing but a high school diploma and desperate determination. But now he wouldn't meet her eyes as he slid the termination paperwork across his desk. "I'm sorry, Lily. Corporate's cutting staff. Last hired, first fired. You know how it is." She knew exactly how it was. She'd watched them hire 2 new servers just last month. She'd seen the reservation book, knew the restaurant was busier than ever. But she also noticed the way Frank's hand shook slightly as he pushed the severance check toward her. The way he kept glancing at his phone like he was expecting a call he didn't want to take. "Did someone contact you?" Lily asked quietly. About me? Frank's silence was answer enough. 2 jobs lost in 1 week. An apartment she could no longer afford, even if the eviction notice was fake. And a baby coming in 6 months who would need everything Lily couldn't provide. The Ashfords had promised she'd regret turning down their money. They were making sure of it, but they'd made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed struggle would break her. They didn't understand that Lily Chen had been struggling her entire life, and struggle had only ever made her sharper. She'd grown up in a cramped apartment in Quincy with her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs after Lily's father died when she was 7. She'd learned to do homework by streetlight when they couldn't pay the electric bill. She'd learned to tell the bill collectors that her mother wasn't home. Learned which convenience stores would let you buy nearly expired food at a discount. Learned that being poor wasn't a moral failing no matter how much the world tried to tell you it was. Her mother had died of a stroke when Lily was 19. Her body simply giving out after years of being pushed past human limits. Lily had found her on the bathroom floor, still wearing her work uniform from the nursing home, 3 hours before her next shift was supposed to start. The cause of death was listed as hypertension, but Lily knew the real killer was poverty. The kind of grinding, relentless poverty that didn't care how hard you worked or how good you were. That was when Lily had made herself a promise. She would get an education. She would build something. She would never end up like her mother, worked to death for people who saw her as disposable. Community college had been the only option she could afford. She'd taken classes around her work schedule, studying in break rooms and on subway rides, slowly building toward an associate degree in business. The night she'd met Thomas, she'd been 6 credits away from graduating. He'd seemed impressed by her drive, had called her ambitions sexy. What he'd really meant was that it was adorable, the way a child's drawing is adorable. Cute that she was trying so hard when she'd never really be anything important. The week after losing her job, Lily went to 3 interviews. All of them had seemed promising until the moment they weren't. Enthusiastic hiring managers suddenly remembering budget constraints. Positions mysteriously being filled right after she left. It happened too many times to be coincidence. The Ashfords' reach was longer than she'd imagined. She was living on her dwindling savings and the small severance check, rationing food, walking everywhere to save bus fare, when she ran into Thomas at a Whole Foods in Cambridge. She was there buying the cheapest protein she could find, doing the mental math of how to make $20 last the week. He was there with Rebecca Whitmore, the banking heiress, both of them laughing about something while their shopping cart filled with organic produce and imported cheese. Thomas saw her first. For a moment, something that might have been shame flickered across his face. Then Rebecca noticed where he was looking, and her expression transformed into something cruel and curious. "Is that her?" Rebecca asked, loud enough for Lily to hear. "The one your mother told me about." They walked over. Lily wanted to run, to disappear, to be anywhere but standing in the organic vegetables section with her bargain brand prenatal vitamins and her visible pregnancy bump while Thomas's fiancé looked her up and down like she was examining something under glass. "Lily," Thomas said, his voice carefully neutral. "How are you?" How was she? She was 4 months pregnant with his child. She'd lost her job and her apartment. She was being systematically destroyed by his family's quiet campaign of economic warfare. But she was still standing. "I'm fine," she said. Rebecca's laugh was like breaking glass. "You're enormous already. How far along are you?" 4 months. 4 months and you're that big? Maybe it's twins. Or maybe it's just, different genetics. Different lifestyle. Her eyes swept over Lily's discount jeans and worn sneakers, making her meaning crystal clear. Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Rebecca, come on." "What? I'm just saying she looks healthy. That's good, right?" "Good that the baby's healthy even if the circumstances are..." Rebecca trailed off, wrinkling her nose like she'd smelled something rotten. This was the woman Thomas had chosen. This was who he thought was more suitable than Lily. Someone whose cruelty was refined by expensive schools and polished by country club memberships, but cruelty nonetheless. "Thomas," Lily said, looking directly at him for the first time, "does your fiancé know you told me you loved me? Or that you said you wanted to build a life with me? Or is that part of your youthful indiscretion story, His face went red. That's not... Lily, you know the situation is complicated. It's actually very simple, Lily said. You're a coward who let his parents buy me off like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person you claim to care about. And now you're marrying someone who thinks cruelty is a personality trait. I hope you'll be very happy together. She started to walk away, but Rebecca's voice followed her. Just so you know, if you're thinking about causing problems or asking for money later, the Ashfords have lawyers who specialize in these situations. Paternity can be very hard to prove. And even if you could prove it, do you really think you could afford the legal fees? You can barely afford groceries. Lily turned back, and both of them must have seen something in her expression, because Thomas actually stepped slightly in front of Rebecca, like he was protecting her from a threat. I don't want his money, Lily said quietly. I don't want anything from your family except for you to stay away from me and my child. We'll be just fine without you. You'll be poor, Rebecca said, like it was the worst insult she could imagine. Your child will grow up poor, and that's on you. You had a choice. You're right, Lily said. I did have a choice. And I chose not to kill my baby for $50,000. I chose to keep the one good thing that came out of my relationship with someone who turned out to be exactly as shallow as his parents. She walked away before either of them could respond, her hands shaking with rage and something else. Something harder than rage. Determination that had been refined by humiliation into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. That night, in the tiny room she was renting by the week in a house in Mattapan, Lily made a decision. She pulled out her laptop bought used, held together with duct tape, but functional, and started researching. Business programs, scholarships, entrepreneurship grants. Anything and everything that could give her a foothold. The community college degree wasn't enough. She needed more. She needed to become more. She found a program at Northeastern, business administration, with a focus on finance and entrepreneurship. Competitive, expensive, but they had scholarships for non-traditional students, single mothers, people who'd overcome adversity. People exactly like Lily. The application deadline was in 2 weeks. She started writing her essay at midnight, fueled by rage and prenatal vitamins and the kind of determination that only comes from being told you'll never be anything. She wrote about her mother, about poverty, about watching the woman who raised her die from the stress of simply trying to survive. She wrote about being offered money to erase her child from existence, about being told she wasn't good enough for someone who'd claimed to love her. She didn't mention the Ashfords by name. She didn't have to. The truth of her story was powerful enough without identifying the villains. The baby kicked as she typed, strong and insistent, reminding her why she was doing this. Not just for revenge, though the desire to prove the Ashfords catastrophically wrong burned bright in her chest. But for this child, who deserved a mother who fought instead of accepted, who built instead of surrendered. What Lily was building in those late-night hours, hunched over her laptop in a rented room while her baby grew inside her, was the foundation of something the Ashfords couldn't imagine. They thought they'd crushed her. They thought they'd reminded her of her place. Instead, they'd given her the fury she needed to transcend every limitation they thought defined her. And fury, combined with intelligence and desperate determination, was about to become the most dangerous force the Ashford family had ever encountered. They just didn't know it yet. The acceptance letter from Northeastern arrived on the same day Lily went into labor. 6 months early seemed impossible. But then again, everything about the last 9 months had felt impossible until it happened. The paramedics found her on the floor of the Mattapan rental, the acceptance letter still clutched in one hand, while the other pressed against her cramping abdomen. Premature labor at 32 weeks. The baby wasn't supposed to come yet. Lily wasn't ready. She didn't have a crib, didn't have proper supplies, didn't have anything except determination and an acceptance letter to a program she might never be able to attend now. "Stay with me," the paramedic said as they loaded her into the ambulance. "What's your emergency contact?" Lily almost laughed. Emergency contact. She had no one. Her mother was dead. Thomas had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. She'd lost touch with most of her friends during the chaos of the past months, too proud to let them see how far she'd fallen. I don't have one, she whispered. The paramedic, a woman in her 40s named Carmen, squeezed her hand. Then I'm it. You're not doing this alone. 8 hours later, Lily held her daughter for the first time. 3 pounds, 12 ounces. Tiny and struggling but alive. Breathing with the help of machines in the NICU. The doctors said she'd need to stay in the hospital for at least 6 weeks, maybe more. They talked about developmental delays, potential complications, the importance of kangaroo care and breast milk, and all the things that cost time and money Lily didn't have. But when Lily looked at her daughter through the isolette, at those impossibly small fingers and that determined little face, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about proving the Ashfords wrong anymore. This was about giving this fighter of a child everything she deserved. She needs a name, the nurse said gently. Lily thought about her mother, about strength and survival, about the women in her family who'd endured and persisted, despite everything the world threw at them. Grace, she said. Her name is Grace Chun. Carmen, the paramedic, came back during her break to check on them. She brought coffee and a sandwich, insisted Lily eat something, and didn't leave even when her break was over. She called in a favor, extended her shift, and stayed. Why are you doing this? Lily asked, exhausted and overwhelmed and unable to understand why this stranger cared. Because 15 years ago, I had my daughter at 17, Carmen said simply. Alone, scared. Everyone telling me I'd ruined my life. A nurse at that hospital stayed with me through my whole labor, even though her shift ended. She told me that sometimes we're put in each other's paths for a reason. So now I'm paying it forward. Over the next 6 weeks, while Grace fought to grow strong enough to leave the NICU, Carmen became the ally Lily desperately needed. She helped navigate the labyrinth of hospital billing, connected Lily with social services, brought her meals when she was camping out in the NICU family room. But more importantly, Carmen saw something in Lily that reminded her of her younger self. What were you doing when you went into labor? Carmen asked one night, both of them watching Grace sleep through the isolette. Reading an acceptance letter. Northeastern. Business program. Full scholarship. Were you planning to turn it down? I don't know how I could possibly accept it now. Carmen was quiet for a long moment. My daughter's 17 now. Straight A's, heading to college next year. You know what I did when she was a baby? I got my paramedic certification. Studied while she slept. Took her to class with me when I couldn't afford childcare, failed tests, and took them again. Everyone said I was crazy for trying. But you know what's crazier? Giving up on yourself because other people think you should. It's different. You probably had support. I had nothing. Carmen interrupted firmly. My parents disowned me. Her father disappeared. I had exactly what you have right now. A baby, a dream, and a choice about which one to sacrifice. I chose to keep both. It was hell, but I kept both. The seed Carmen planted grew roots. While Grace was still in the NICU, Lily contacted Northeastern's admissions office. She explained the situation, expecting rejection, expecting them to withdraw the scholarship offer. Instead, she got Dr. Patricia Morrison, the director of the business program, on the phone. Miss Chun, I read your application essay. Do you know how many applications we receive from people who faced real adversity? Not my parents could only afford one vacation this year, adversity, but genuine struggle? Maybe 5%. Do you know how many of those people write about it with the clarity and determination you showed? Less than 1%. You think a premature baby is going to make me withdraw your scholarship? I'm not that stupid. Dr. Morrison became the second crucial piece of Lily's transformation. She deferred Lily's admission by 1 semester, connected her with the university's single-parent support programs, and did something else that would change everything. I mentor women in business, Doctor. Morrison said during one of her visits to see Grace in the NICU. Most of them are already successful, looking to level up, but every few years I take on someone different. Someone hungry. Someone with something to prove. I think you might be my next project. I can't pay you. I don't want your money. I want your commitment. When Grace is discharged, when you start school, I want you to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. I want you to soak up every piece of knowledge like your survival depends on it. Because it does. What Dr. Morrison didn't tell Lily yet was that she'd built a career on finding underestimated women and turning them into forces of nature. She'd been poor once too, had clawed her way up from nothing, and she recognized in Lily the same fire that had driven her own rise. She saw potential that went far beyond a bachelor's degree. Grace came home after 7 weeks, still tiny but healthy. Lily's rented room was barely big enough for both of them, but Carmen had helped her gather donations, a second-hand crib, baby clothes, supplies. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The same week Grace came home, Lily received a certified letter. Thomas Ashford Jr. was formally denying paternity and refusing any financial support. The letter, written by expensive lawyers on heavy cardstock, made it clear that unless Lily wanted to pursue a costly legal battle she couldn't possibly afford, she should consider this matter closed. The Ashfords still thought they were winning. They'd pushed her out, cut her off, made sure she understood her place. What they didn't know was that Lily had stopped caring about their acknowledgement. She had something better than their money or their name. She had rage that had been refined into purpose. Classes started in January. Lily attended with Grace strapped to her chest in a baby carrier, switching between taking notes and nursing during lectures. Some professors looked uncomfortable. Others were inspired. Dr. Morrison made sure everyone knew that Lily Chen was there to stay. The coursework was brutal. Finance, accounting, business strategy, market analysis. Lily studied while Grace slept, memorized formulas during feedings, wrote papers in the brief windows when Carmen or one of the other single mothers from the support group could watch the baby. She finished her first semester with a 3.9 GPA, but grades weren't enough. Dr. Morrison pushed her further. You're smart, Lily, but the world is full of smart poor people. You need to be strategic. You need to understand how money really works, how power really works. You need to learn the language these people speak. Dr. Morrison started bringing Lily to networking events, introducing her to investors and entrepreneurs. At first, Lily felt like an imposter in her thrift store business casual, surrounded by people in $1,000 suits. But she watched, listened, learned. She studied how they talked, how they positioned themselves, how they turned conversations into opportunities. One of these connections was Marcus Webb, a venture capitalist who'd started his own firm after growing up in Roxbury. He saw something familiar in Lily's hunger. "You've got the grades, you've got the drive," Marcus said over coffee one afternoon when Grace was 8 months old. "But what's your endgame? What are you building toward?" Lily had been waiting for someone to ask that question. "I want to build something in affordable housing development," she said. Luxury condos are everywhere, but working families, single mothers, people who actually need quality housing, they get shoved into whatever they can barely afford. I want to change that. Create developments that are actually livable, actually affordable, actually treat residents like human beings instead of revenue streams. Marcus leaned back, studying her. "That's a good mission. It's also not very profitable. It can be. If you're smart about the model, mixed income developments, tax incentives, partnerships with nonprofits, it's possible to do well while doing good. You just have to care about the doing good part. And what does this have to do with whatever fire I see burning behind your eyes every time you talk about this?" Lily smiled, and it wasn't a particularly warm smile. "Let's just say I have personal experience with landlords who think poor tenants are disposable. I'd like to prove there's a better way." What she didn't say was that she'd spent months researching the Ashford family's business holdings. Thomas Ashford Sr. had made his fortune in commercial real estate development. High-end properties, luxury apartments, the kind of developments that displaced working families and replaced them with tech workers and finance brothers. His firm, Ashford Properties, had a reputation for maximizing profits and minimizing concerns about community impact. She didn't tell Marcus that every business strategy she studied with one question in mind. How could this be used to compete with and eventually defeat Ashford Properties? She didn't mention that late at night, after Grace was asleep, she compiled information. Every article about Ashford Properties, every public record about their developments, Every lawsuit they'd settled, every community they'd displaced, every corner they'd cut. She was building a profile, understanding their weaknesses, learning their patterns. By the time Grace turned 1, Lily had finished her second year at Northeastern with a 3.95 GPA. She'd landed a competitive internship at a real estate development firm. She was working 20 hours a week, taking full course loads and raising a toddler. She was exhausted down to her bones, but she was also becoming exactly what she'd promised herself she'd become: dangerous. The Ashfords, meanwhile, had forgotten about her entirely. Thomas had married Rebecca in a wedding that made the society pages. Ashford Properties had expanded into new markets. They were thriving, successful, untouchable. They had no idea that the young woman they dismissed as a poor girl with delusions was studying their business model, identifying their vulnerabilities, and building the expertise to one day dismantle everything they'd built. Lily's plan wasn't fully formed yet, but the pieces were coming together. The knowledge, the connections, the understanding of how power really worked in the world of real estate and development. And most importantly, the patience to wait until she was truly ready. Grace's first birthday party was small. Just Carmen, Dr. Morrison, Marcus, and a few other people who'd helped along the way. They celebrated in Lily's slightly less terrible apartment in Somerville, the one she'd been able to afford with her internship wages. As Lily watched her daughter demolish a cupcake, covering herself in frosting and joy, Carmen pulled her aside. "You know they're going to try to stop you," Carmen said quietly. "When you're successful enough to be a threat, they'll come after you the way they did before." "I know," Lily said. "I'm counting on it." "Why?" "Because this time, I'll be ready. And this time, I won't just survive what they throw at me. I'll use it. 3 years to go. 3 years until the pieces would fall into place. Until Lily Chun would become someone the Ashfords couldn't ignore or dismiss. 3 years until the family who'd offered her $50,000 to disappear would discover that underestimating her was the most expensive mistake they'd ever make. The countdown had begun. The Ashfords just didn't know they were already losing. 4 years after Grace's first birthday, Lily Chen walked into the ballroom of the Four Seasons Boston wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than her entire wardrobe had 5 years ago. Grace, now 5 years old and confident in her own small dress, held her mother's hand as they navigated through the crowd of Boston's real estate elite. The annual New England Development Summit, the same event where Ashford Properties had announced major deals for the past decade. Thomas Ashford Sr. was scheduled to give the keynote speech in 20 minutes, celebrating his firm's latest luxury high-rise project in the Seaport District. He had no idea that Lily Chun, founder and CEO of Grace Communities Development, was about to destroy 40 years of his family's legacy in less than an hour. Lily had spent 4 years building toward this moment. After graduating summa cum laude from Northeastern, she'd worked for 2 years at Marcus Webb's venture capital firm, learning the intricacies of real estate finance and development deals. She'd saved every dollar, lived in modest apartments, and built relationships with investors who believed in her vision of affordable, quality housing. 18 months ago, she'd launched Grace Communities Development with Marcus as her primary investor and Dr. Morrison on her board of directors. Her first project had been a mixed-income housing development in Dorchester that actually treated residents with dignity. It was profitable, innovative, and had garnered attention from urban planning experts across the country. Her second project was about to be announced, and it was going to end the Ashfords. "Miss Chen," a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years. Victoria Ashford stood 3 feet away, her face a mask of barely concealed shock. She looked older, more severe, her eyes narrowing as she took in Lily's transformation. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the beautiful child at her side. "Mrs. Ashford," Lily said pleasantly. "It's been a while." Victoria's gaze dropped to Grace, doing the math, seeing Thomas's features reflected in the little girl's face. The same blue-green eyes, the same sharp chin. Evidence that couldn't be denied standing right there in a velvet dress. "This is your daughter. This is Grace." "My daughter. Say hello to Mrs. Ashford, sweetheart." Grace, who'd been coached for this exact moment, smiled politely. "Hello." Victoria looked like she might be sick. What are you doing here? I'm a developer now. Didn't you hear? Grace Communities Development. We specialize in affordable housing projects that don't displace existing communities. Novel concept, I know. Before Victoria could respond, Thomas Jr. appeared with Rebecca on his arm. He froze when he saw Lily, all the color draining from his face. Rebecca's eyes went straight to Grace, and her expression transformed from confusion to understanding to something ugly and panicked. You weren't invited to this event, Rebecca said sharply. Actually, I'm speaking on a panel this afternoon. Innovative Approaches to Urban Development. I was specifically invited by the summit organizers, but I'm glad I ran into you all. Saves me the trouble of tracking you down later. Tracking us down? Thomas found his voice, though it came out strained. Lily, if this is about money. It's not about money, Lily said. Well, not your money anyway. I have my own now. This is about something else entirely. Marcus appeared at her elbow right on schedule. Ms. Chen, they're ready for your announcement. Announcement? Victoria's voice had gone sharp with suspicion. Lily smiled, and it was the same calm, dangerous smile she'd given them 5 years ago in their drawing room. You should probably take your seats. The keynote's starting soon. You won't want to miss it. 10 minutes later, Thomas Ashford Sr. stood at the podium, confident and commanding, beginning his presentation about Ashford Properties' latest triumph. Behind him, slides showed architectural renderings of a gleaming high-rise in the Seaport District. Luxury condos starting at $1.2 million. A project that would displace a community arts center and 3 small businesses that had served working-class families for generations. He was midway through his speech when the first phone in the audience buzzed. Then another. Then a dozen. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as people checked their devices. The Boston Globe had just published a special investigation. Ashford Properties, a legacy of exploitation and fraud. Lily watched from her seat in the 3rd row as Thomas Sr.'s face went from confident to confused to horrified. Someone had sent him the link. She could see the exact moment he opened it on his phone behind the podium. The article was comprehensive, devastating, and meticulously sourced. 4 years of investigation, public records requests, interviews with displaced residents, examination of tax documents. Every corner Ashford Properties had ever cut, every community they'd destroyed, every bribe to city officials, every environmental regulation they'd skirted, every promise they'd broken. But the real bombshell was the financial fraud. Lily had spent 2 years working with a forensic accountant, analyzing public records, finding the patterns. Ashford Properties had been inflating property values on their loan applications while deflating them on tax documents. Classic fraud, but done carefully enough that no one had noticed. Until Lily had compiled everything into a comprehensive report and handed it to both the Globe's investigative team and the Massachusetts Attorney General's office simultaneously. Thomas Sr. stood frozen at the podium. In the audience, his son had gone white. Victoria looked like she might faint. Rebecca was frantically whispering to Thomas Jr., probably already calculating how to distance herself from the family. We'll take a brief intermission, Thomas Sr. managed, his voice shaking. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters swarmed toward the Ashfords. Phones were out. People were reading the article. Executives from competing firms were exchanging glances that ranged from shocked to gleeful. Lily stood up, took Grace's hand, and calmly walked to the front of the ballroom. The summit organizer, looking panicked, approached her. Ms. Chun, given the circumstances, would you be willing to present your new project now instead of this afternoon? We need to fill the time and... Of course, Lily said smoothly. She stepped up to the podium. The crowd gradually quieted, curiosity overcoming chaos. The Ashfords were trapped in their seats by reporters and scandal, forced to watch. Good morning, Lily said, her voice steady and clear. My name is Lily Chen, CEO of Grace Communities Development. I was supposed to speak on a panel this afternoon, but given the morning's revelations, I think now might be a better time to announce our newest project. She clicked to her first slide. 5 years ago, I was a single mother working as a waitress, struggling to afford basic necessities. I know what it's like to be priced out of communities, to be treated as disposable by people who see housing as nothing but a profit margin. That's why I started Grace Communities Development, to prove that you can create quality housing that's actually affordable while still running a profitable, sustainable business. Another slide. Architectural renderings of a beautiful mixed-income development. This is our newest project. A partnership with the city and 3 nonprofit organizations. 200 units of housing in Roxbury, with 20% affordable units, 40% middle income, and 40% market rate. Community spaces, green building design, local hiring requirements. Profitable for investors while serving the community. Revolutionary concept, apparently. She paused, making eye contact with Thomas Sr. across the room. We broke ground on this project 3 months ago. The land we purchased? It was being sold by a property owner who'd originally planned to develop luxury condos, but pulled out when community opposition made it too difficult. That property owner was Ashford Properties. A murmur went through the crowd. Lily smiled. They sold us the land at a loss, thinking the community requirements made it worthless. We're going to turn it into something that actually serves people instead of displacing them. And we're going to make a profit doing it. Funny how that works when you actually care about the people you're building for. The room burst into applause. Real, genuine applause from developers and city officials who'd been waiting for someone to challenge the Ashford model. Thomas Sr. tried to stand to leave, but a man in a dark suit blocked his path. Federal agent. Lily realized with satisfaction. The Attorney General's office was wasting no time. After her presentation, Lily took Grace to the bathroom, away from the chaos. Carmen was waiting there. She'd taken the day off to be nearby. Just in case. You did it, Carmen said, pulling Lily into a hug. Not yet, Lily said. That was just the opening move. Over the next 72 hours, the Ashford empire collapsed with stunning speed. The Attorney General announced a formal investigation into the fraud allegations. The FBI raided Ashford Properties offices, seizing records. Major investors pulled out. Banks called in loans. The luxury seaport project was frozen mid-construction. Thomas Jr. released a statement through his lawyers, claiming he'd had no knowledge of his father's business practices and was cooperating with investigators. Rebecca filed for divorce within 48 hours, her family's PR team working overtime to distance the Whitmore name from the scandal. The piece that gave Lily the most satisfaction came 3 days after the summit. A text message from an unknown number, which she knew had to be from Victoria Ashford. You destroyed us. Are you happy now? Lily didn't respond immediately. She spent the afternoon playing with Grace in the park, watching her daughter run and laugh, healthy and happy and completely unaware that her mother had just dismantled an empire. That evening, she finally replied, I didn't destroy you. I simply held up a mirror. You destroyed yourselves through 40 years of greed and cruelty. I just made sure people could see it clearly. One more message came through. That check we offered you was mercy. You should have taken it. Lily smiled as she typed her final response. That check was an insult. And insulting me was the most expensive mistake your family ever made. By the way, I'm donating $50,000 to a women's shelter in your name. Consider it a thank you for the motivation. She blocked the number. The Ashfords no longer deserve space in her life, even digitally. If you've stayed with this story to see justice served, make sure you're subscribed to see what happened next, because the consequences for the Ashfords were just beginning. And Lily's rise was far from over. The woman they'd dismissed as a poor girl with delusions had become their worst nightmare. And she'd done it with nothing but intelligence, patience, and the understanding that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that your enemies destroy themselves trying to maintain relevance in a world that's moved past them. 18 months after the summit, Lily stood in the community room of her Roxbury development, watching families move into their new apartments. Children ran through hallways that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Parents carried boxes into homes they could actually afford, homes that didn't treat them like inconvenient revenue streams. Grace Communities Development now had 4 projects across Boston, with 2 more breaking ground in Providence and Worcester. The business model. Lily had pioneered profitable mixed-income housing that actually served communities was being studied at Harvard Business School. Dr. Morrison taught a case study about it to her MBA students, using Lily's company as an example of how to build sustainable success while maintaining ethical standards. Marcus's venture capital firm had tripled its initial investment. Other investors were begging to get involved. Lily had been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Fast Company. The developer who's proving that doing good can mean doing well. Read one headline. But the success that mattered most to Lily wasn't in the headlines. It was watching Grace, now nearly 7 years old, grow up in a world where her mother's name meant something beyond the scandal that had surrounded her birth. "Mommy, can I go see the playground?" Grace asked, tugging on Lily's sleeve. "Stay where I can see you," Lily said, watching her daughter run off to join other kids on the brand new playground equipment. Carmen appeared beside her, now the head of community outreach for Grace Community's development. "Hard to believe this is the same woman I found on a floor in Mattapan 5 years ago." 6 years, Lily corrected. Grace's birthday is next month. 6 years from collapsing in a rental room to owning half of Boston's most successful affordable housing company. That's gotta feel good. It did feel good. But not in the way the Ashfords might have imagined revenge would feel. Lily had learned that the sweetest victory wasn't in watching enemies suffer. It was in building something so solid, so meaningful, so undeniably successful that their attempts to diminish her became irrelevant. The Ashfords, meanwhile, had learned the opposite lesson. Thomas Ashford Sr. had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for bank fraud and tax evasion. Ashford Properties had filed for bankruptcy, its assets liquidated to pay restitution to investors and the communities it had harmed. The Beacon Hill brownstone had been sold. The legacy that had taken 2 generations to build had evaporated in less than 2 years. Victoria Ashford had moved to Florida, quietly and without fanfare, living off what remained of her trust fund. Lily had heard through industry connections that she'd aged dramatically, the stress of the scandal and her husband's imprisonment carving deep lines into her face. Thomas Jr. had tried to rebuild under a different name, starting a small property management company. It had failed within 6 months. No one wanted to do business with an Ashford anymore, regardless of whether he'd been directly involved in his father's crimes. Rebecca had divorced him and married a tech executive, already pregnant with her first child, someone else's child with a different last name, a different legacy. Last month, Lily had received an email from Thomas Jr., no subject line, sent from a Gmail account instead of his old corporate email. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what my family did was unforgivable. But I saw the photos of Grace on your company website. She's beautiful. She looks happy. I was wondering if maybe someday I could meet her. Not as her father, I lost that right, just to see her once. To know she's real." Lily had stared at that email for a long time. 5 years ago, she might have felt vindicated. Might have enjoyed his desperation, his loss, his belated recognition of what he'd thrown away. But 5 years of building instead of destroying had changed her. She'd learned that carrying rage was exhausting, that the best way to move forward was to simply move forward. She'd replied with 4 sentences. "Grace has a good life. She's loved, secure, and thriving. She doesn't need the confusion of a father who denied her existence for the first 6 years of her life. I hope you find peace, but you'll need to find it without us." She blocked the email address and never thought about it again. Dr. Morrison had read the exchange. Lily had shown her everything, grateful for the mentorship that had transformed her life. "You could have twisted the knife," Dr. Morrison had said. "Used his daughter as leverage, made him suffer more. Why didn't you?" "Because that's what people like the Ashfords do," Lily had answered. "They use people as weapons. They see relationships as transactions. I spent 6 years becoming someone different from them. Why would I prove them right by acting like them at the end?" Now, watching Grace play with children from families who could finally afford safe, dignified housing, Lily understood the truth that had taken years to crystallize. The Ashfords hadn't lost because she destroyed them. They'd lost because they'd built everything on a foundation of cruelty and exploitation, and foundations like that always eventually crack. She'd simply been there to document the collapse. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Expansion proposal for New Hampshire projects. Also, Time Magazine wants to interview you for their Next Generation Leaders issue. Congratulations, by the way. You're officially too successful for me to take credit for discovering you anymore. Lily smiled. 6 years ago, she'd been sitting in a drawing room being offered $50,000 to erase her child from existence. Now she was running a multi-million-dollar company, raising a brilliant daughter, and being interviewed by Time Magazine. The transformation wasn't magic. It had been exhausting, relentless work. Late nights studying while Grace slept. Years of sacrificing comfort for investment. Countless moments of doubt, of exhaustion, of wondering if she was crazy for trying. But she'd had something the Ashfords had never understood. She'd had a reason beyond money or status or preserving some legacy. She'd had Grace, and the determination to give her daughter a world where being poor didn't mean being disposable. That determination had carried her through every obstacle, every setback, every moment when the easy path would have been to give up. As the sun set over the Roxbury development, families gathered in the community room for the building's official opening celebration. Lily had insisted on keeping these events simple: pizza, music, no fancy catering or champagne. These were homes for real people, and the celebration should reflect that. Grace ran up to her, slightly out of breath from playing. "Mommy, Miss Carmen says you have to give a speech." "Does she now?" Lily looked over at Carmen, who shrugged innocently. "People want to hear from you," Carmen said. "They should know who made this happen." Lily reluctantly took the microphone. The room quieted. Dozens of faces, families who'd been priced out of every other neighborhood. Single mothers like she'd been, working people who'd been told they didn't deserve quality housing, all looking at her with gratitude and hope. 6 years ago, Lily began, her voice steady. "I was exactly where some of you are now. Struggling to find affordable housing, being treated like my poverty made me less worthy of dignity and respect. I was told by very wealthy, very powerful people that I would never amount to anything, that my daughter would grow up poor because I was too proud to accept their terms." She paused, looking around the room. "Those people were wrong. Not because I'm special or exceptionally talented, but because I refused to believe that where you start determines where you finish. Because I had people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Because I learned that the best response to people who try to make you feel small is to become so undeniably significant that their opinions become irrelevant." Grace squeezed her hand. Lily squeezed back. "This building, this company, everything we've built, it's not about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about proving something right. Proving that everyone deserves quality housing. Proving that businesses can be profitable while being ethical. Proving that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Building something so good, so solid, so meaningful that the people who doubted you become footnotes in your success story." The room erupted in applause. Lily handed the microphone back to Carmen and pulled Grace into a hug. Later that night, after Grace was asleep in their beautiful apartment in Cambridge, a place Lily owned, not rented with a mortgage she could easily afford, Lily sat on her balcony with a cup of tea and thought about the journey from that Beacon Hill drawing room to here. The Ashfords had meant to crush her. They'd meant to remind her that people like her didn't get happy endings, didn't get to join the club, didn't deserve their respect or their son or their money. Instead, they'd given her the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. They'd given her a reason to become unstoppable. She didn't hate them anymore. Hate required energy she'd rather spend on building her company, raising her daughter, and proving every single day that success built on genuine value would always outlast success built on exploitation. The check for $50,000 would have lasted maybe a year. The empire she'd built from the ashes of their rejection would last generations. Grace Community's development would continue growing, would house thousands of families, would prove that a better model was possible. Grace Chen, the daughter the Ashfords had wanted to erase, would grow up knowing that her mother had turned rejection into revolution, humiliation into empire, and cruelty into a reason to build something beautiful. And somewhere in Florida, or in a failed business office or behind prison walls, the Ashfords would occasionally see headlines about Lily Chen's latest success and remember the moment they'd underestimated her. That memory would be their real prison. Not the legal consequences or the lost money or the destroyed reputation, but the knowledge that they'd had the chance to be part of something extraordinary and they'd chosen cruelty instead. Lily's phone buzzed one last time that night. A voicemail from Dr. Morrison. Lily, I just heard that MIT wants you to guest lecture on ethical development practices. Also, 3 new investors contacted me about your New Hampshire expansion. Also, and this is the important one, I'm proud of you. Not because you're successful, but because you're kind. You could have become like them. Could have let the anger turn you into something ugly. Instead, you became proof that you can win without losing yourself. That's the real victory. Sleep well, my dear. You've earned it. Lily saved the voicemail. Someday, when Grace was older and asked about the family that had rejected her, Lily would have stories to tell. Not stories about revenge or bitterness, but about resilience. About the difference between winning and becoming worthy of the win. The best revenge, Lily had learned, wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building a life so rich in meaning, so full of love and purpose and genuine success, that their cruelty became nothing more than the spark that lit a fire they could never extinguish. She'd gone from a woman being offered money to abort her child to a woman building homes for thousands of families. From disposable to indispensable. From powerless to powerful in ways the Ashfords would never understand because their power had always come from taking. Hers came from building. And that made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. Because sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up giving you the exact motivation you need to become extraordinary. And that's a kind of justice no court could ever deliver.